Welcome back. Now, I'm going to share with you the main reasons why I found my career at the agency to be fulfilling, fascinating, and fun. As I said earlier, I was one of those people who knew for years before joining the agency that being an analyst there was my dream job. So I was both conditioned to love it, but I suppose also primed to be disappointed if it didn't live up to my expectations. Expectations based on almost no actual information about what the job was like, because remember, this was before the internet, so I couldn't just Google what's it like to be an analyst at the CIA. Fortunately, the job actually exceeded my expectations, so I have a strong list of reasons why I loved it at the agency. My first reason relates directly to why I wanted to join the agency in the first place. As a current events nerd and national security wonk wannabe, I wanted to have a sense of what was really going on in the world, beyond what I might see on the news. I figured that working in a classified environment would give me that. As I had hoped, being an analyst definitely gave me the behind-the-scenes view of history that I wanted. I had a good sense of what was really going on in international relations, and I knew what was happening beyond what I could see in the news. What I didn't expect, however, was being exposed to big stories long before they hit the headlines. A great example of this was the suspected North Korean nuclear reactor in the Syrian desert, which the Israeli military eventually destroyed in an airstrike in 2007. As is now well documented in the press, this was an all-consuming subject for many agency analysts long before there was any public awareness of it. The fact that no word of the suspected reactor ever leaked out is a testament to how seriously agency officers take their oath of secrecy. There were many similar examples throughout my career, so the agency definitely delivered on my hope for a more complete picture of world events. Another thing I loved about being an agency analyst was that I was part of a meaningful mission, protecting the security of the United States and its citizens around the world. I expected as much when I joined the organization, but I got more than I expected in the extensive support my analysts gave to protect U.S. and allied forces and innocents in war zones. I also didn't realize how much of my career I'd spend providing analysis in support of stopping conflicts that didn't even involve Americans at all, halting the spread of weapons of mass destruction and thwarting terrorist groups. As I like to put it, we were not making widgets. We were doing something that really mattered. We weren't dealing with quarterly sales figures or profit margins, not that there's anything wrong with that, but we were dealing with issues of life and death and war and peace, and it gave meaning to my career. One of the best and worst things to happen to the agency's public image is the Hollywood blockbuster. Most people's perceptions of life as a CIA officer is shaped by James Bond, Jason Bourne, and similar movies. It hopefully comes as no surprise, however, that real life is nothing like the movies. For one thing, movies leave out all of the paperwork. They're also free to include gadgets that violate the laws of physics and operations that ignore the existence of laws, regulations, and the economic realities of working for the government. Having said that, working for the agency definitely has a coolness factor. I remember first realizing how other people viewed my job, and by extension me, when I went to my first college reunion after starting at the agency. Sure, my friends in law and business were able to say crazy things like, "We had to get the nanny a bigger Lexus," something I swear I did here. I couldn't say anything like that, but what I could say was that everyone was much more interested in what I did than what all the executives and lawyers there did. A much bigger part of the coolness factor than what other people thought, however, was getting to do things during my career that I thought were really cool. I had the chance to brief a crown prince in his palace garden, sit in on a meeting with a president and his entire cabinet, do a trap landing on an aircraft carrier, conduct meetings in smoky beer halls overseas with a clandestine asset, race through the streets of a foreign capital in a bulletproof vehicle while wearing body armor and protected by armed guards, and discuss sensitive issues for an hour with a vice president in his West Wing office. I also learned about crazy high-tech collection tools and operations more creative and daring than anything I saw in the movies. I often drove home at night reflecting on how I did not have a normal job. It could be pretty damn cool, and I loved that, and my experiences pale in comparison to those of many of my peers. Tied closely to this coolness factor was the chance to travel the world. I visited every continent except Antarctica, saw the pyramids, the Taj Mahal, and the Great Wall, and got to know many of the capitals of Europe. I had the honor of eating and drinking for my country in formal dinners where sometimes I had to make painfully awkward small talk through an interpreter, and in other cases, had fascinating conversations with people whose backgrounds and experiences were dramatically different than mine. Another thing that being an analyst at the agency blessed me with was a high degree of responsibility early in my career. In my first few years there, my managers trusted me enough to represent them in meetings around Washington, where I was almost always the youngest person at the table. I was only at the agency 3 months when I was sent to brief the number 2 official in the Department of Defense without any adult supervision. Another intelligence community agency sent an officer who was very senior but not well versed in the material, and the deputy secretary pretty much ignored the other guy and listened to me. As I proved myself, I was given increasingly bigger challenges in a way I didn't see happening in other organizations. You might have noticed that throughout this course I've frequently referred to the agency as we rather than I or they, which is noteworthy considering I haven't been an agency employee since 2015. This reflects another thing I loved about working there, the camaraderie. Because of the insular nature of working in a classified environment, particularly one isolated behind a fence line on its own campus, you tend to get very close to the people you work with because they're the people you see all the time. Toss in long hours, the occasional overseas trip together, a sense of common purpose, that mission thing I mentioned earlier, and people who stay in the job for decades, and you have the recipe for friends for life. It's not a fluke that pretty much all of my adult friends come from the agency. They're the people with whom I had a natural connection. I've never felt that level of camaraderie in any other job. It's something I really miss and was lucky to have, and I certainly am not alone in my use of we to talk about the agency. At the beginning of this course, when I ran through all the positions I held at the agency, one thing should have been clear. From year to year, you have a lot of variety in your career. I also noted when trying to describe an average day that there was plenty of variety from day to day. For me, this was a huge benefit of working at the agency. I was able to cycle through a bunch of very different jobs, all while staying in the same organization. This variety allowed me to have several smaller careers within my larger one and was a huge plus of working at the agency. The last reason why I loved working for the agency is much more practical than the others I've covered so far. The agency offered a level of stability and security that's hard to beat anywhere else. My job was immune to the whims of economic cycles, earnings seasons, acquisitions, or other factors that can disrupt employment in the private sector. Not only did I have job security, my pay was good and the benefits were fantastic. I was able to provide for my family and build financial security while doing all the cool stuff I just talked about. I also had more paid leave than I knew what to do with, a far cry from the 2 weeks a year I earned in my new private sector job. And had I stayed until retirement, I would have had access to health insurance for life. I've just given you 8 pretty good reasons why I loved being an analyst at the agency. Next, I'm going to strike a very different tone and give you some reasons why you might not like working there.